Yo, what's going on, guys? Recently, I was invited to be included in a joint interview by Sterling Cooper. And if you don't know who Sterling Cooper is, he's actually an award-winning adult film star. Now, we met on TikTok before I was banned, and I've seen a lot of his content, and he kind of helps guys with erectile dysfunction. He helps guys actually get over their fear of talking to women, their performance anxiety, and a whole plethora of other things. So I have no doubt this is actually going to be an extremely entertaining and informative video for you guys. And so just go ahead and stay tuned.
Look, it's fantastic that we're finally talking to each other, other than just watching each other on TikTok and agreeing with each other like through a phone. Like, yeah, this guy's got a point. But you know what? It's going to be interesting because I have a like, I guess you could say, like an insider's perspective on a topic that you've referenced a few times, and that is OnlyFans.
Yeah.
And was it, I believe you before we were recording, you mentioned this video where I think you started the video with, "It's not that dissimilar to prostitution." Is that the way you started this TikTok video?
There was apparently a trend, although I've only seen one video of this trend. But maybe it was a trend of this woman who, it was a cop actually, which was what really ticked me off about it. It's like the one people you'd expect to uphold the kind of virtuous standards that we would want to look up to them for are the ones acting like the people they arrest. So it really ticked me off, and it was a female cop who was kind of doing this like sexy walk trend to the beat of this song, right? That's basically what it was. And I started out by saying, this is not dissimilar to what prostitutes do when they're trying to attract customers. And that unavoidably pissed off a lot of people.
Did that one get? I mean, your whole channel got taken down. I was going to say, did that one immediately get taken down, or did it explode enough to not get taken down?
That one got taken down within the first hour of me uploading it, and somehow I did appeal it, and it got posted back up after a week. Right? They like to take their time with it, but it still blew up after it got taken down. I think it got around 200,000 views. So we were still all right in that area.
Yeah. Now, look, this is actually going to be, and I think this is a cool thing for us both to talk about and share, and kind of share our unique opinions on OnlyFans. Okay. Would you liken OnlyFans to prostitution?
Would I liken it to prostitution?
Would you say would you say that OnlyFans is basically prostitution?
It's sort of like entrepreneurial prostitution, where the prostitutes are the pimps themselves.
Entrepreneurial prostitution. Okay, cool. I like it.
So it is, maybe it is empowering. They're always calling it empowering, so maybe they're right a little bit.
It's funny how like empowering always coincides with like sexual objectification. Those two always seem to like really go hand in hand.
What do you mean? Elaborate.
Like everything that I see feminists quote as empowering basically involves showing either tits or ass.
Yeah, it's I think they've confused empowering with unrestricted, and those two things are not the same. They really don't have. See, this is why I don't want to sound cheesy, but this is exactly why I called my channel Nuance Now. It's like, I don't like how interchangeably most people use vocabulary. You really have to be specific. And this word empowering, eliciting, I suppose if you're the one eliciting the money, then it can be empowering in a way. But
empowering if you're getting paid for it, yeah, sure.
Right, sure. But displaying your most sensitive parts, I actually find that I was actually really impressed, because I wouldn't want to be a porn star. I wouldn't want to display those parts of myself for people to see. And even doing this alone, in ways, it doesn't really make sense to me that it's empowering for people to see inside of you,
Just a lovely way of putting it. Because here's where I'll say they kind of have a point, because like sexuality is women's power. Like when you think about like I've kind of came to this argument kind of recently where like men's primary tool, right, for getting what they want in life through the vast majority of human existence was force, aka violence, right? Brute strength was kind of how we got stuff. Like that guy has something I want, I'm going to club him and take it, right? Basically, right. Or that village has stuff we want, we're going to go collectively beat them up and take their shit. It was violence. Right. Violence is how dudes got their way.
Okay.
Now with women, you could there's two kind of ways of looking at it. The way that women typically got what they wanted through, human existence was people could use the phrase persuasion. I personally like to use the phrase manipulation because I don't think manipulation is a bad word.
Right.
But it's basically the ability to manipulate others emotionally, right? And sex and the power that women have with their sexuality is primarily a tool for manipulating others, primarily manipulating men, right? Right. I don't see this as a dirty thing to say. Tiger got stripes, man. Like this is the way we are. I don't think this is a bad thing to say. Some people would take offense to the way I just phrased it, but whatever. But nowadays, right, we live in a society with laws and police officers and things. So men's primary tool of getting what they want out of the universe has disappeared, is no longer capable. Like, I mean, you could try to get stuff with violence, but you're going to end up in jail very quickly, right? So all that men and women have left is the female tool, which is manipulation, which is persuasion. That's all we have now, And even in the context of like relationships, like I'm not trying to sound too like someone's going to take this out of context, but screw them. Like, back in the day, 100, even 50, like 70 years ago, like husbands could were like beating wives and shit, and they weren't going to jail for it. You know what I mean?
Often as people say they are, or at least as often as people say they were, I don't really believe that. I think that's feminist propaganda.
I don't think it was as commonplace as they pertain. Absolutely, because like laws still like. I think Steven Crowder had this. I don't know if you're familiar with Steven Crowder. He had this really, really good argument a long time ago, and it was about like, it was basically the counter narrative to this idea that husbands were beating all their wives, like all husbands were beating their wives, and it was like there was these old Victorian laws where like if you beat your wife, you would get strung up in like the public square and like in stocks and stuff. Like that was a legit law that happened. So like. But the fact that is like now it's like you go to like the punishment for that kind of behavior is even more extreme now. It's like you go straight to jail kind of shit, right? Rather than like public shaming or whatever.
Execution.
Not execution, but public shaming. That kind of gives you an idea of like how this has shifted even within the context of a relationship, right? And yeah, for all like. Let's go down that path because you just mentioned these ideas of feminist lies, right? I think one of the things that I have the biggest gripe with when it comes to all these feminist lies, and there is a lot of them, but this idea that women were subjugated under the patriarchy, and like they had it so bad, and like. They were oppressed. Yeah, that's probably the best word to use, but they were oppressed. I mean, what is like, okay, men go to war, men did all the dying, they did all the fighting, they did all the hunting, let's go back in time. They were getting killed by all the tigers, like stepped on by all the woolly mammoths. They were facing down all the machine gun fire. They were like charging into battle against cavalry. All in the name of keeping their women safe and providing for their women. Yet women had it bad.
Even if there were darker forces at play, they were under the impression that's what they were doing, right? Now, I actually really like that point. Men don't actually get to complain, because if men complain and go on strike and start complaining about oppression and victimization, then the whole world shuts down. That's
Exactly.
what happens. If men go on strike, the entire planet shuts down. We go back to the Stone Age. Women get to complain and victimize themselves because they don't actually operate in any fundamentally significant, role in society. I mean, what are they? Even the female entrepreneurs, I've mentioned this in one of my videos, but if you'll notice, most female entrepreneurs, whenever they like to brag about being self-employed or something like that, it's usually something along the lines of virtual assistant or something where they can work. That it's a job that wouldn't exist without the modern world existing.
Yeah. and like the whole idea of this is a big thing that most feminists completely forget, is that the entire idea of like women in a workforce and like women no longer being housewives wouldn't exist if it weren't for men doing two things. One, inventing the birth control pill. That's a big one. Two, inventing like sanitary products like the pad and the all these things were invented male inventions that have like separated women from their kind of like the burden of childbirth and the burden of like hormonal periods and things.
Right.
And yet men are still the bad guys in this instance. And it's like, and you're absolutely right. That's the other part of this whole sort of feminist lie, is that like whenever feminists try to preach for equality, it is never equality in sanitation jobs. It's never equality in garbage collecting. You don't see any picket lines demanding more female garbage collectors. It's always more female CEOs for some reason. And that tells you everything you need to know. It's not about equality. It's about power. It's always been about power. It's got nothing to do with equality, because you can't, honest to God, you can't have equality between two things that are actually different. If I tell you, like, here's an apple and here's a banana, are they equal? Well, they're both fruits, sure. But apart from that, they're not equal because they're different. And so, like, right. You can't, and that's my opinion on it. Like, you can't, men and women can never be like equal in the sense that people talk about it, because they're different. Like, we have different biologies, different biological urges, different needs, different natures, different desires. They're fun, and a lot of those desires are fundamentally opposed to one another, especially when it comes down to like sex and sexual reproduction and mating and dating strategies.
Right. And that's, I actually want to go back to the power thing. The only thing that ever exists, the only type of fight that has ever happened is one for power. It might look different. It might be theatrically played out differently. They might say we're fighting for freedom. They might say we're fighting to, well, freedom's a very popular one, but we might say we're fighting for our religion or something like that. But really, it's only ever been about power. And one of the main points, one of the main reasons that I talk about the things I do is not to bash women. It's to point out that women would act the same as men if they were the strong ones and we were the, I guess, sexual ones. It's like the only thing that looks different about it is that we have the more obnoxious way of gaining power. We're the ones, like, when we gain power, we do it in a loud way. We do it in a destructive way. When women gain power, or when they seek power, when they enact and operate in their strength, they do it in ways that are unseen, and especially unseen by uneducated men, which is most men. That's why they're able to pretend that they're victims. Women act the same way as men. It's just that women are being told that they don't have any power. You have no power. The government's supposed to give you stuff. And men are supposed to, I guess, stop everything they're doing and just bow down, except when you don't want them to bow down and you do want them to dominate you. And they're just supposed to guess because they're supposed to be smart enough to take hints, but you're not supposed to take it the wrong way. And it's like, except don't take the hint when I want you to be in charge, but do when it's like, it's so just you can't, you just short circuit trying to keep track of all the backwards standards and double standards and hypocrisy.
There was something you said a second ago, which was like, you don't want them to be men. You don't. I can't remember what the exact words you just used, but it was something like, they don't want you to be dominant. They don't want you to be in charge, except when they do. And when they do is always in the bedroom. And that's one of my big things is like, for guys, it's kind of like the last place that a man can actually, it's acceptable for a man to be a man, for a man to be masculine, for a man to be dominant, for a man to take charge over a woman is in the bedroom. That's like the last place where you don't really hear any women kicking up a fuss about it. And that tells you everything you need to know about the true nature of female psychology and the true nature of female desire. Because that's what we're bought. We're genetically programmed to survive and replicate. That's it. Like, everything else on top of that is just fluff. Like, realistically, when you boil down to it, it's survival and replication. Everything comes down to those two drives, right? And so when you look at female, like, how are women responding sexually to dudes that they're attracted to? It's always the dude that's dominant, masculine, leading, taking charge. Women are attracted to a guy who, for want of a better way of saying it, a guy that could kill them, like a guy that is strong, like stronger than them, a guy that has the capacity for violence, not necessarily who is violent, but has the capacity for violence. I think that's a very, very important distinction. What was that? Sorry?
They can feel that he has the capacity for violence. And I actually want to use that to segue into something that you said a second ago, which one of the main arguments is that, that's the only context in which we would need men to be leaders and men to be dominant, is in the bedroom. And I actually disagree with that. I don't want to let them get away with saying that anymore, because it's not true. Men are valued not because they can lift heavy shit or open jars. They're valued for their masculine energy. And masculine presence is not something that can be replicated by the government or by women or by feminists, no matter how hard they try. And so even in regular life, even in everyday life, you as a man are supposed to be, and it's funny me saying like you as a man, I'm only 21. I turned 21 yesterday, actually. But you as a man, and these are things that I'm learning as well, are just supposed to be in this state of aloofness, which is you have a grasp on what's going on around you. You have a grasp on where things are going to lead. And if somebody else is naturally falls into, like if another man falls into that leading space naturally, then yeah, fine, you can follow him. But it's sort of like you're the leader of your own life. And men have been taught not to be the leaders of their own life or of anybody else's life. They're taught that they're tyrants if they even attempt to indulge themselves in that natural inclination. So that's why women freak out so much. It's not because women aren't dominant or men aren't dominant anymore in the bedroom. It's because men aren't masculine in general anymore. Yeah, and
I'd agree. Yes.
The reason there's so much promiscuity, the reason women are having such trouble getting a lock on, their value, and they feel like they are not valued as women unless they sleep around, unless they send nudes to guys who are using them, and other things like that. These are things I've heard from women. It's not me making this up. The reason they feel used unless they do those things is because they're not allowed to be feminine either. And there's such a lack of masculine energy in life in general that the only place they can receive masculine energy and interact with masculine energy is physically, when it is physically a penis in the bedroom and they're literally having sex. That's the only taste of masculine energy that they get. And that's what they want, but they need it in smaller doses through interactions with masculine men. That's what would really solve this sex industry issue, the promiscuity issue, the fatherlessness issue as well, is we need a return of masculine energy just in general.
And what kind of proves that point is that and you said something before, like no matter how much women or feminists sort of try to replicate that masculine energy, they can't. And the proof of that pudding is in single mothers. Without a father, like single mother households statistically do, like the children that come from single mother households do so much worse off than households with a mother and a father. And that is a testament to the importance of a father in the home, the importance of a strong masculine figure in the home.
Right.
And you mentioned a second ago that men have been taught not to lead, right? They've been deliberately taught, don't lead, otherwise you're a tyrant. Well, how does that manifest in the context of a family? That manifests with a father who's getting pushed around by his wife, a husband who gets pushed around by his wife, who's a complete pussy, who rolls over, and then surprise, surprise, she divorces his ass or cheats or cheats on him. And it's like, well, obviously, because she doesn't respect the guy. She doesn't respect if she can walk all over him, then she doesn't respect him. And it's like, and women do not like being in that role. They do not like being in that, especially in a relationship, in a family context. They do not like being in that leadership role, being the one that has to be responsible. They want the guy to step up and be the responsible one. But the thing that guys get confused about is that women these days will test dudes they'll test a guy to see if he has a pair of balls. And guys, like we said before, have been taught to just roll over rather than putting their foot down and being like, no, baby, this is what we're doing. We're going my way. You're like, we're going this way. Follow my lead. Right.
That's actually huge about the shit testing, because a lot of the time, a lot more often than women especially would like to admit, the things they say are quite simply not genuine. It's literally just as genuine as it might sound. It's just a shit test, and the guy is supposed to, even in some cases, straight out ignore what she's saying. He doesn't even have to respond to it in a clever way. He doesn't have to be like, I'm taking the lead. It's not, see, people think of it in such a primitive way. They think, well, if you're not just gonna listen to her, then that just means, well, you're gonna ignore and just, no, fuck you, I'm not listening. That's not the case. Men do listen. It's still listening, but men need to be taught that women very, very often say things that are quite simply not true. When for example, when she wants you to open up, when women push you to open up, it's almost a game to them. It's like outwardly, it's so fucking crazy to learn this, because outwardly they are these Oscar award winning actresses, man. They'll cry even when she's crying. I just want you to open up to me. Why don't you talk to me? You never tell me anything. And if you do, she goes, oh, that's it.
He's a pussy.
Like
I got him. Right. That was it. That's it. You're right. It's so fun. Like, you're lucky because you figured the shit out at 21. You're very, very lucky. You're very fortunate. I hadn't figured all the shit out when I was 21. But there's a couple of things there. It's like, hang on, I had my brain fart. Keep going, it'll come back. I had a brain fart. I forgot exactly what I was going to say to you then.
Well, I'll tell you what. One thing I wanted to ask you was, have you noticed what's the difference in effects that being in the porn industry has on men versus women? Do you notice a significant difference in how they evolve people?
Yeah, like for dudes, it doesn't affect them. It doesn't really change them much. Like the only thing I'll say that it does to dudes, and like I'll admit that this includes me, is that it makes you more perverted. Like you get more weird, sick, twisted fantasies.
Jesus Christ.
Purely because like you're acting out like fantasies every goddamn day at work. And so it's like, what might be a fantasy to like the average guy that and like a lot of dudes might never have this experience in their life. Say like 2 women sucking his dick, right? Something like that, a threesome. A lot of dudes will go through their life having never had that experience, right?
Right.
in the porn industry, like, okay, like first 6 months, like, bang, that fantasy's done. I'm sorted. You know what I mean? What next? So you're living at, not only are you living out your own fantasies, but you're living out other people's fantasies because they're the ones writing the scripts for you. We don't pick. It's not like I pick what scenes. It's not like I choose the script. I don't write the script. Some other dude's writing the script, but he's writing the script for the fans who are subscribing and paying for the website, right? So what we do on screen is dictated by the paying customer. So if they want to see sick, weird, twisted, perverted shit, then we act out sick, weird, twisted, perverted shit. So you kind of, I've done stuff that I would never have even considered doing prior to getting into porn, and not in a bad way, like just like, oh, that wasn't a fantasy of mine,
right? And
now I've done it, and I'm like, I actually kind of like that. So it exposed me to a whole bunch of perverted shit that I didn't know I was into before, or I guess it's kind of like the regular vanilla sex is still enjoyable, but it's not like it doesn't sort of hit that spark in the same way as it might do for a regular guy. So that's what it does, and I've noticed that with other guys in the porn industry as well. So that's what it does for guys. For girls, it's really weird, man, because I'm trying to, like, I hear a lot of guys in sort of like the whatever the kind of space that you and me are somewhat adjacent to, right? You might call it red pill, you might call it man, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah,
this kind of men's dating advice space, right?
Yeah.
And there's this common thread of guys saying, like, the more, and there are some statistical studies to kind of back this up, like the more promiscuous a woman, the more sexual partners she has over the course of her life, the less like her she is less capable of pair bonding long term. She's less likely to have a fulfilling, happy relationship long term. The more partners she has, I think if you look at the graphic, it kind of like it goes up and then it dips down very slightly and then it goes up again. There's like, I think 5 partners or something. For some reason it dips down. I don't know why, but after that, it keeps going up again. Like, so the more partners she has after that, the less satisfied she is long term.
I see.
Now there's that. So there's some evidence for that, right?
Yeah.
And this idea of, like, she's less likely to pair bond. However, a guy by the name of King Dre introduced this idea to me only a week and a half ago, and it was a very interesting argument. I'd love to hear what your perspective on this is.
Okay.
If that argument is true, then how the hell do pimps keep their women in love with them?
It's
because
the
a pimp's like, because like a pimp's hose, they give it, like, a lot of guys will throw out the argument that, like, okay, a pimp like beats his women and has them hooked to drugs and stuff. I actually know pimps, and that ain't the case. Like, it's purely based around love. Like, they love that man, and so they'll go fuck another dude, and then they'll give him the money, you know. And so I'm like, how is that? How do these two kind of ideas? How can they kind of coincide?
It has a lot to do, I would say, with, now obviously I don't know the pimps that you know, but I would imagine that type of relationship is not very healthy. And so it has a lot to do with it's a thing called a trauma bond, which is when you're with them, you experience a higher high than anybody else can provide for you. So anybody else seems boring. When you're not with them, when you're not being treated to that type of toxicity and the trauma, see, because it's not just good. The reason you're addicted to them is because you experience a higher high than anybody else, but they're also abusive towards you. And so
they're also the lower low.
Yeah, a lower low. Yeah, exactly. And so they abuse you, but you're addicted. And so part of that is whenever you experience a guy who's, or anybody really, who is emotionally healthy and emotionally stable, that's boring to your brain. That's boring to the chemical side of your brain.
You know, the old saying is, you can be anything to a woman except boring.
Right. Oh my God. That's so perfect. And so these pimps are more entertaining. They provide more pleasure chemicals to the woman's brain than any other guy can do it. But that's the power of trauma bonds.
They're more emotionally polarizing, like you said, because it's higher highs, lower lows. Like that's right. Say that's the range of like a pimp, but a regular dude, his range is like here.
Right. The spectrum.
I like to use the phrase like an emotional roller coaster. So he
Yeah.
takes her on this emotional roller coaster, like up and down, whereas a regular guy is like, you know, like a Ferris wheel at the park. She's just like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. This is not as exciting.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Ferris wheels either. I mean, unless you're but that's actually a good point. Part of the reason, and this is kind of bringing up a much deeper topic, but part of the reason women are addicted to these emotional roller coasters, just kind of in general, is they're not able to ground themselves in the same way, or at least to the same degree that men are able to ground themselves. The reason men are able to do these excruciatingly painful, difficult, frightening tasks like go to war and work in these scary, dangerous work conditions is because we're able to ground ourselves in and distance our identity from the chaos of reality. And so we can kind of operate with reality in a playful sort of way.
Mm.
And women are not able to do this, which is why whenever a woman experiences something very traumatic, she wants like a breakup with a boyfriend, they always get a haircut or dye their hair or something along those lines, or go on a sleeping around spree, something along those lines, because they are too entrenched within the hormonal imbalances and the emotional roller coaster of reality. They're not able to distance themselves from it.
They have to react to every emotion they get.
Right.
Whereas
And they
a man does not. A man can get an emotion, feel an emotion, and ignore it, and then keep doing something else.
Right. It's like it's there, but he's able to recognize that and this is what the masculine energy does. This is why most men are so pathetic, is because they're more effeminate. They're not grounded. And the man is able to recognize that emotion is not going to overtake him. That's the one factor. We're trained to expect difficulty. We're trained to expect adversity. We're trained to expect pain from the moment we are little kids. We get made fun of for not being able to take pain. And so we have to deal with this in a way. And what the mind naturally does, what our minds do, and I'm kind of a spiritual guy, so if I say anything like that, it's kind of what the way that our brains operate is we're in touch with this kind of universal consciousness. That's why all of us are conscious. And men are able to tap into that with masculine energy. That's why we're able to laugh about it. And this is what naturally happens to us when we expect to experience adversity. Women, on the other hand, are taught to expect everything to go well for them. And if it doesn't, it's a result of systematic oppression. And so rather than just experiencing a negative thing and going, yeah, man, that sucked, and figuring out ways to heal from that and get over it, like men are, their brain instead looks for somebody to blame. They don't take that time to distance themselves the way that men do.
Well, because men, like women, will do anything to avoid taking responsibility. Like men have the burden of taking responsibility for things. Like it's that's kind of why like the father's the head of the household. Like he's in charge. It's his responsibility to take care of everybody else. Like the burden falls on his shoulders, right? That's kind of his natural position. But women will do anything to avoid having the responsibility fall on their shoulders. And this is why you see, for the same reason, that's why you see women falling into groupthink and like being so agreeable with the crowd, right? In any kind of circumstances, because they don't want to be singled out and like have a finger pointed at them and being held responsible or held accountable.
Right.
If they go along with the crowd, then their responsibility is like spread evenly across the crowd, across the mob. It's not them. It's not on them.
Right. It's for the same reason that you wouldn't necessarily sue an employee if you wanted to sue a company. You wouldn't sue the employee. You would sue the entity of the company. And men the reason women are attracted to divergent men is because it implies strength. Men are more likely to survive outside of the assistance and the comfort of a tribe. They're able to survive on their own. They're able to start new things, or they're more likely to survive starting new things on their own. And if they successfully do that, then they're incredibly strong. They can withstand reality, and that's very attractive to women. If you ever noticed, MMA fighters a lot of the time have super, 10, 9, 10, some guys say 10s don't exist, but super attractive girlfriends. But it's because they do a dangerous thing, and especially if they're winning a lot, then it's much more attractive. But it implies
and like violence in and of itself, like it's a primal thing. It implies he can protect her.
Right.
That's kind of my whole thing when I teach guys to be dominant in the bedroom. A lot of what I teach them is I don't teach them to I give them like a sliding scale. I don't teach them to crack a bitch in the face
right.
straight away. If she's into that, okay, cool, we can get there. Sure. If she's into that, we can get there, and a lot of women are. However, not every guy is comfortable in doing that, and that's fine. But I'll teach dudes how to be like more dominant in the bedroom, and what that means to a large extent is demonstrating that you have physical strength and physical power over her. Because what does that imply? It implies if you're stronger than her, if you can pin a girl's hands down, if you know how to choke a girl or pull a girl's hair, whatever it is, right? All these things that are somewhat that kind of fall into that spectrum of like sadomasochism, right?
Right.
These things all imply that you have the capacity for violence and that you are strong. And those things mean that subconsciously, like back here in the primal part of the brain, they mean that you can protect her. It's this weird, it's weird and kind of like counterintuitive to a lot of guys to hear that the first time, because they're like, surely, why would she feel safer if I'm being like more aggressive? Well, that's the brain, man. It's the female brain. Welcome to reality. I can't explain it any more than that. Like that is the beast you're dealing with. So by demonstrating that stuff, especially in the bedroom, it demonstrates that you can protect her, even though we don't have like tigers and lions and shit roaming around. That doesn't matter. Like that's the world that your brain evolved in. So that's what you're left with. That's what you have to deal. That's what you have to deal with, unfortunately. So do with that what you can.
Right. And another thing that kind of references what we were talking about earlier, it ties into women dispersing the responsibility as well. Well, kind of, I have a bunch of points here, but one of the reasons, even if a guy's attractive, even if a woman finds a guy attractive, she won't sleep with him unless she can reason it in a way that it makes sense socially to do that. So, for example, if she finds him attractive, but he can't make it happen in a way that wouldn't make her look like a slut or wouldn't diminish her social status, then she still won't sleep with him.
Yeah, the idea of plausible. She needs what's called plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Right, because that's the responsibility thing you talk about, and it's like, the way I was taught to think about it is, imagine if she recanted the story. Like, say you take a girl home and you end up having sex with her or whatever, right? If she recanted the story to a friend of hers, would the friend call her a slut? Or could she say, could she say, it just happened?
Right.
Because that's the plausible deniability. That's the ability to not have responsibility. Oh, like as a perfect example, it might be something like, oh, he invited me to his house to meet his puppy dog, and then I just magically sucked his dick. But there's plausible deniability built into it, because the guy didn't say. Like, because if she tells her friend, oh, he asked me if I wanted to come over and smash, and I said yes, she's going to be like, you're a slut, Becky. Right. But if she says, he told me to come meet his puppy, and then one thing led to another, like that is the plausible deniability there that she needs. Because even though women are more promiscuous these days, they still have these same biological like impulses to not. Like to preserve their what do you want to call it? It's not the virginity anymore, but to preserve their chastity, preserve their innocence,
purity,
preserve their value. Yeah, like to prove that they're a good long-term baby incubator.
Right. Yeah. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. Well, another factor that ties into this is men think that because women don't operate in reality and don't think about reality in a I guess as it is, they don't see reality as it is, that they're the same way when it comes to relationships. And so a lot of guys are naive when it comes to women and relationships. But women actually see relationships as they are. Women look at relationships the way guys look at reality, and vice versa. Guys see relationships, they project ideals onto relationships. That's why the Disney princess archetype takes on so well with guys. It's because that's how guys see, that's like their perfect girl, and so they project it onto the girl they're seeing. Whereas women actually are they project their ideals onto reality, and regardless of what's happening in reality, obviously when women are raised properly, then they're able to see reality as is to a certain degree, but they project their ideals onto reality, and that's why they're more inclined to vote for socialist leaders, for example, and they see men as a business as well. I've said this a couple times, but they see men the way men see business. They're operating with more than one man at a time, because if you were looking to invest in something, you wouldn't, it's not smart to put all your money in one spot, right? If you know anything about investing. Now, guys underestimate this because of their naivete. That's basically the point I was trying to get across.
A good practical manifestation of that idea is the way that women will look at a guy's dating profile versus the way that men look at a girl's dating profile. Let's say a Tinder profile, right?
Yeah.
A guy or an Instagram page or whatever, anything like this, right? But let's just use a Tinder profile as an example. A guy will look at a girl's Tinder profile and say there's like 5 photos, and in one of them she doesn't look great. In 3 of them she looks okay, acceptable, and in one of them she looks fantastic. The guy will look at that and base his assessment on her off her best photo. Flip that around for a chick, and she will base her assessment on his profile off of his worst photo. And that is tried and tested. And I've said this to girls, and I've said, like, when you look at a guy's profile, like, how do you determine if he's good or not? I find his worst photo, because they're being realistic about what he's like.
Yeah.
The dude is being idealistic, like you said.
Right. Yeah. That's actually a really good point. And I'm going to say something about that, but I wanted to also mention that the reason the excuse of it just happened or it was just a mistake worked, as long as you got in the door with a simple excuse, is because she needs to be able to, it's the plausible deniability, but which means she needs to be able to imply that something happened that qualified you. Somewhere in the "it just happened," something, it's kind of implied. She doesn't really need to explain it. That's why it works. But something needs to have happened that qualified you in her eyes, and she needs to imply that it would have also qualified him in the eyes of society, that she should sleep with him. It would have also qualified him in the eyes of society. That's kind of the difference. And as far as Tinder goes, I've actually, when I was a few years ago, I actually did that same thing. As far as idealizing, I'm like, even on girls who I didn't find attractive, I'd be like, no, there's no way you look like that. Come on. And I would look for the good picture of her. But I think that guys do that because it improves their chance of finding a mate. Most guys don't, and this is, relatively well known, but especially primally, guys throughout history, I think, like, I might be wrong about this, but I think 60% of guys die virgins. 60%.
Yeah, it's like 40. Yeah, it's like 40%. It's something like 40% of all the men that have ever lived have reproduced, and it's like 90% of women or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. I'm butchering the numbers, but it is something around that ballpark.
Right. And I think that trait of idealizing women and ignoring their faults in spite of their faults comes because most women don't find most guys attractive. They only find the top 10% attractive. And
Absolutely.
so in order for a guy to compete with that, he can't really have the same high standards. He has to ignore the faults because it improves his chances of mating. That's why guys also in relationships deal with extraordinary amount. We will never know the true extent of abuse that men suffer at the hands of women. Now, that's not victimizing. We're just in the context of the situation. We're never going to find out the extent to which men experience abuse at the hands of women because they simply either ignore it or they don't want to talk about it, or they don't even see it as abuse. It's not even something that registers in their brain.
I mean, that a lot of the problems that men face in relationships can be solved with simply having abundance.
Right.
Like by just having an abundance of options, all these problems magically disappear. Like, and all these things sort of self-correct. But having those options in the first place, having abundance, is the hard part. It's like the hungry don't get fed.
Right.
That's kind of the idea. It's like the 80-20 principle played out in real life with relationships. And we said that a lot. I mean, what you were mentioning before with like the whole her after she slept with a guy, a girl coming up with any excuse she can make to justify why she slept with him. It's like before she sleeps with a guy, she's looking for any excuse to reject him. After she sleeps with a guy, she's looking for any excuse to validate that choice. And this is why you'll see girls who sleep with like drug dealers or mafia bosses or whatever, and they'll turn around like a guy, like legitimately like a guy who has killed a man, and they'll turn around and call him sweet. You see this all the time. You see like absolute scum of the earth guys, and their girl will be like, "He's such a sweetheart." He wasn't a sweetheart when he was shanking some dude, but but she has to justify him in some way. So like because he called her beautiful once, he is a sweetheart. It's so beautiful. This like the moment sex happens, the power dynamic, the shift of the power dynamic is so stupid that it is that way.
That's actually a really good point. It's sort of after the sex happens, they are essentially pair bonded with them. And that's why it breaks their pair bonding when they sleep around, because that's why it breaks them psychologically as well, because they just don't know. A lot of people are going to find this offensive, but women are biologically programmed, I would argue, to find a man. Another thing I've heard Rollo Tomasi say is that women who as a child experience their father dying, or women who don't have the masculine role model as a child, hit puberty earlier because they're biologically programmed to find a strong male role, a male archetype to lead them.
You know what? It's interesting you say that, because me and my best friend, we kind of came up with this conclusion recently, and it was everybody talks about this idea of like a rite of passage for dudes is very, very commonly, like that's a phrase people are familiar with, right? The idea of a man's rite of passage, like in ancient tribes, and in Sparta or in Papua New Guinean tribes, like you go out, you kill a lion, you do some shit, and then bang, you're a man. You've gone from being a boy to being a man, right? People understand that idea. With women, we were like, we had this thought, like, is there an equivalent for women? And we came to the conclusion that we think there is, and we think the equivalent for women is kind of exactly what you just said. It's transitioning from her father's tribe to her husband's tribe. Is this idea of the female rite of passage? Now, here's where it's going to get real controversial. You've said some controversial shit. I'm going to say some even more controversial shit.
Okay.
There's two ways that is done. One is the traditional. Oh well, I mean, you might argue this is actually the less traditional of the two. One is the father gives his daughter away to the husband. That's what we do in traditional marriage, in Christian marriages at least. So it's symbolic of, okay, you're leaving your father's tribe and you're now going to your husband's tribe, or you are now part of his tribe, right? The other way that it was done traditionally in a lot of old societies is they were kidnapped. One tribe invaded another one, and they literally killed the dudes and stole the women and took them back to their tribe. And this, oddly enough, this practice is still done it's like it's played out as a game, as like a courting game in a lot of societies still around the world. Like I think Kazakhstan still does it, or maybe it's somewhere in Mongolia. There's a few places around the world where they are ritually kidnapped, where women are ritually kidnapped and then taken. Like they know it's like their family knows it's going to happen. It's not an illegal thing. She kind of her best friend knows it's going to happen, but the groom and his groomsmen will go to her village and steal her, and then take her back to his village.
What does that look like? They come to the house or something?
They rock up in a car, walk into the house, take her, and drive off with her. That's how that plays out. But that is very, and what happened, and when you, because I've seen a documentary on it, and when you watch it, it's interesting to see what happens. She has this big emotion when even though she knows this is going to happen, because it happened to her sister and her cousin, and like this is what's done in the village, right? Even though she kind of knows what's going to happen, when she is transferred from one tribe to another, she has this big emotional not like a breakdown, but like she's crying, and like it's very, very emotionally overwhelming experience. And then there's this catharsis afterwards of it's like she accepts her fate, and she's like, all right, this is where I am now. And she accepts and falls into that role. And I kind of like the same way a boy might feel catharsis after killing a lion and becoming a man. You know what I mean? I feel like it's a very, very similar equivalent experience.
Yeah. And one thing that I saw recently that kind of lines up with that is this guy, I don't remember his name, but this guy was going for a PhD, wanted to prove, he had this theory that female athletes need to be accepted before they can perform, and male athletes need to perform before they will allow themselves to be accepted. And so it comes in with that catharsis of feeling like you went through the rite of passage, you succeeded in going through the rite of passage. Another thing I was going to say is some people might call that Stockholm syndrome, which is the catharsis that the woman might experience from being ritually kidnapped.
Being actually kidnapped.
Right, being actually kidnapped. And I think that the trauma bond, the experience of being kidnapped is still, even if it's like, let's say in our primal, tribe people existence, let's say that even when it was scary, even though people need to realize that there was such little abundance, you didn't have preferences back then. Nobody was like, but I'm in love with this caveman. It wasn't like that. It was just pure emotion. Whoever was stronger is who elicited the emotional responses. And nobody, I mean, yeah, people probably still had problems. That's why we still fought for things. That's why we still defended things. But it wasn't nearly as volatile and confused as people are nowadays. And so I think that the women being kidnapped, even in contexts where their village was being raided by another village, let's say, they probably enjoyed, not consciously, but, part of them probably got excited. And that's what biologically programmed them to enjoy the dominance in bed, because like you were saying, it implies safety. Even if it's a bad guy taking her who's going to use her to make babies, okay, what else are they doing? They're also providing for her. And now so many people, I can already hear them taking the clip of me saying this, and you're advocating for rape. Like, things like that.
You've already been, your TikTok's already been canceled. They can't double cancel you.
I know. What are they going to do? So look, the point, what I'm saying here for the people who are freaking the fuck out right now, because I know there are some, is not that you have to keep in mind every context involved. And at the same time, the reason people get so offended is because they think they have to lock down an opinion. You don't have to lock down an opinion, guys. We're just chatting. It's not like we're going to go out and find somebody to ritually kidnap and have our babies. Like,
well, you might not. Don't speak for me.
Sounds a little fun. No, but guys, these are just things to let simmer in your mind. These are just things to let hover around. It's like you can find it interesting without, completely advocating. Like maybe it works for some societies. It's like if you really wanted to get my opinion, yeah, okay, I would probably ban that. I'd probably say, yeah, no ritualistic kidnapping, that's going to get way out of hand. A lot of these things only worked in smaller populations. There wasn't such a diverse amount of different mindsets. There's so many different subcultures these days. The reason things get out of hand is because there's so many different subcultures. There's such a diverse amount of mindsets as far as how people think the world should work, how the type of rules, the type of laws that the society should have.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these things you also have to remember happened back when the entire planet of the entire population of humans on the planet was less than 100,000, less than 1 million. That's when all these biological factors were programmed.
And you know what? And it's kind of funny that you mentioned that we now live in a world where there's all these kind of different subcultures. We live in a multicultural society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that idea in and of itself is a feminine idea. The idea of like tolerance and acceptance, and the idea that like all cultures are equal is a feminine idea. Because let me put another sort of hypothetical here. Who benefits from a multicultural society? Not in modern day context, but let's rewind the clock like thousands of years.
Yeah.
Who benefits from saying, don't worry about that tribe of barbarians, they're fine? Well, it's not the dudes, because the dudes get killed. It's the women, because the stronger dudes, like they let the two tribes of dudes fight each other out, and the stronger ones get them. So it's the women who win when two cultures clash. It's always the women who win. So that idea of allowing multiculturalism is a female imperative based idea.
True.
And the other thing I'll add in here while you're letting that simmer is you mentioned a second ago. So like about like the whole like kidnapping and tribe on tribe coming in and kidnapping like a woman from a tribe, whatever. What is not a nice thing to say, but you've got to understand that women have the capacity to fall in love with a man who has killed her husband and killed her children. Killed her husband and like, I don't want to use the word on YouTube, but like raped her, sexually assaulted her. Like women have it's not a nice thing to say, but like we wouldn't exist if that wasn't the case. Like you said, the women who bred were the ones who didn't put up a fight, or who didn't try to fight the dude who was killing her husband. Right? Realistically, that's the case. Like the women who did got killed and didn't pass on their genes.
Right.
But the women who were like, all right, I'm gonna let these dudes fight it out, and then whoever wins takes me, they're the ones that passed on their genes. So that's kind of it's not a nice thing to say, but tiger got stripes. You gotta be aware of what we're dealing with here. Like this is, and it's so people are totally fine talking about the nasty side of male nature. Yeah, men are violent. This is totally accepted and totally fine. Like no one is batting an eyelid when you say that. But you say things like what I just said, which is like, well, women kind of have the capacity to like switch partners very, very easily. Oh, cancel him. It's terrible.
Yeah. That's another part. That's kind of another reason why I do what I do. It's like nobody's trying to bash women. It's just that why is it that you can hear shit about men all day long, but the only time the cognitive dissonance causes you to freak out is when people say things about women? It's because we idealize women. And another thing I wanted to bring up is the monkey branching. That's probably the source of the monkey branching. And the Stockholm syndrome as well. I'm not really a big fan of psychological terms. I think it's people trying to put labels on things that are kind of, we're supposed to just come to these conclusions ourselves. It's not really something whoa, that only happens in unhealthy people. It's like, nah,
Yeah.
I think there's a way too high of a standard, or rather higher low. I don't know which one, but people are very confused. And the main point I wanted to say is people are absolutely wrong and absolutely confused about what causes women to fall in love. They think that it's like when women say they wish guys were nicer, they're not meaning, what they mean is that they were conscious, meaning they listened to her. See, if a guy's strong, but he's like, you ever met one of those like boomer guys? I'm thinking of boomers right now. One of those boomer guys who is like, yeah, that's not a cow, that's my wife. Like that type of shit. That's very unconscious. You're not masculine when you're doing that. That's not a masculine joke. That's like the type of joke where you're not funny, but it's like it's logically funny joke, and so you'll get some laughs. It's like that's weak
like a
shit.
cheap laugh joke.
Right. But that's fuck, I forgot what I was gonna say. But that's basically
I threw you off a train, sorry.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, that's essentially what women mean. But the thing that causes women to fall in love is not being nice, it's being strong. Respect is what has to be established if you want the woman to fall in love. It's not being nice. And there's this whole, maybe there was, okay. See, part of it is maybe there was a little bit of I think there undoubtedly was a lot more violence and sexual assault going on, 100 years ago. But as soon as we gave women some voices, the reason it's dangerous to do that, and this is another, I'll say something more controversial than you now. The reason it's dangerous to give women voices is because they're not grounded. Like I was saying earlier, they're not grounded. And so the first thing that comes to mind, if they're in a good mood, yeah, everybody come into the country. We don't need to filter anybody. We should help anybody. And if they're in a bad mood, it's all men are evil, kill all men. Yeah, that's why women are not the tribes people. That's why tribe leaders. That's why women are not the tribe leaders, because their emotions are the reality to them.
Yeah. Absolutely. That is one of the biggest things that I think guys need to understand. Any guy who's having women troubles or is frustrated by women is understanding that concept, that her reality is entirely based on the emotions she feels in that moment. So this means and she believes it too. She fundamentally believes it, right? So this means that if she's upset, if you're in a context of a relationship, if she's upset with you, in her mind, right now you're an asshole and you've always been an asshole. If she is in love with you and is happy right now, then you've always been amazing. Right now you're amazing and you've always been amazing. And those two things can exist within 5 minutes of each other.
Right.
Those two totally different states of being, of seeing the world can exist within 5 minutes of each other, because her reality is entirely based upon the emotions she feels. Whereas a guy will be like, and this is where my friend Roland Tomasi, who you mentioned a minute ago, he brings this up a lot, this idea of like relationship equity, this idea of which you come across when guys get raped in divorce courts, like they get divorce raped, right?
Oh yeah.
They'll be like, oh, but I put a roof over our heads. I put our kids through college. I did all this. I did all that. And at the end of it, and then 20 years later, she's like, he's not the same man. He's not the man I fell in love with. Or you changed, or whatever it is, and she leaves you. Well, yeah, it's because your investment do not matter, because her emotions right then and there are you're boring. So nothing else matters. And if guys just understood that, there would be a whole lot less frustration and disappointment on behalf of men in the world.
Yeah, there's guys. I know, I can already hear them, man. There's guys who are gonna be going, this is why you should stay single. This is why. See, the solution's really not to participate at all. It's like, dude, okay, don't participate with half the planet. Look, oh my god. I'm not going to pretend I even believe you. It's like everybody wants to feel that bonding. It's like it's not. They think it makes them weak to admit that they do want a good woman. It's not weak to admit that. Everybody wants
Of course,
that.
no. And I'll take it a bit further than that, and I'll say that these same guys, they have this kind of romantic view of the past. They think of, and I'm not even convinced that these kind of women existed. This idea of like the ready-made 1940s housewife.
Yeah,
that she was perfect in every way. He didn't have to tell her what to do. Like, she was submissive, she was feminine by default. He didn't. He had no burden of performance. Like, he could just be a lazy sack of shit.
Yeah,
And she would still be this perfect doting housewife. I'm not convinced that actually existed, if I'm being perfectly honest. But even if it did, in today's day and age, that doesn't exist. We know that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it exists somewhere in Eastern Europe. I've been to Eastern Europe recently. It's very, very. I'm kind of convinced that it actually does exist in Eastern Europe after my experiences there. But that's beside the point. Anyway, even if it doesn't exist in the Western world, so you have to create that woman. Like, you have to and the way you create that woman is by setting and enforcing boundaries within the context of a relationship. It's
Right.
and because you mentioned something before about women falling in love with you through strength, and I'm of the opinion that women fall in love with you by doing things for you. The more a woman commits to you, the more it's this idea of investment. The more she invests in you, and this kind of comes back to the way that women interpret the world. The more she does things for you and invests in you, she is going to backwards rationalize why she did things for you. After the fact, she's gonna be like, why did I clean the dishes, and why did I do his laundry, and why did I do this? Oh, it must be because I love him.
Right.
Otherwise, I'd be an idiot. I must love him. Otherwise, I'm a tool. Otherwise, I'm a pleb, right? So
even if it's not true, that's the robotic line they say over and over it. I love him. I love him. It's like when they say I have a boyfriend, even when they don't have a boyfriend, or even when they like you and they're gonna sleep with you, but they still say that I have a boyfriend. It's like this. It's the backwards rationalization that I was talking about. They have to provide that initial resistance as long. That way, it's somewhat. There's some room in there to somehow say I made a mistake, and I'm laughing because it's just such a shock to learn about when you first learn about this.
Yeah, and another thing I'll throw in here is that, tying into what I just said about her backwards rationalizing that she loves you. Notice that is not when you're around her. Women fall in love with you in their own head when they're not around you. It's that they need. You have to have that space and that time apart in order for her to love you, because the old saying is distance makes the heart grow fonder is actually true. If you're around somebody, I'm touching on multiple things here, so tell me if I'm going a bit all over the place. But if you're around somebody 24/7, then especially a woman cannot create this fantasy of who you are in her head, because you're literally there in front of her. You're a real boring ass person in front of you. You're too real, which makes you too boring. If there's space, if she's not around you all the time, well, then in her there's mystery. There's what is he doing? Who is he with? What's is he talking to women? Is he getting in a fight? Is he building a business? What is he doing? She doesn't know. You might be just sitting at home on the fucking couch doing nothing. But in her mind, if she's falling in love, if she's in love with you, then she's going to create this fantasy character of who you are in her head, and she can only do that when she's not around you. And then and on top of that, she can only miss your presence, and want you and feel the need and a wanting to be around you when she's not there.
This is huge actually, and I want to add on to that. It is the space, yes, but so many guys fuck this up, and I fucked this up specifically in this way because I didn't understand it deep enough yet. I thought it was it doesn't matter how I act, as long as I can get a rise out of her, and then I create the space, and then boom, I'll win. And then the next time I would try to talk to these girls, they'd be like, "Fuck you! Why are you still talking to me? I'm ignoring you." And it was so confusing to me. It was so infuriating. I'm like, "What's going on?" That's why leaving is one of the cardinal rules in talking to women. Is you have to leave on a high note, and talking to anybody really, but leaving on a high note. The reason for this is because the space that you leaves this left, like during the emotion, whatever emotion you leave them in, that's the emotion from which they extrapolate opinions about you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you leave them on a boring note, if you leave when the fire kind of dies out in the conversation, and you go, "Yeah, well, I got to be getting home. This was fun though. I'll see you later. It was fun." You can't logically say this was fun. You can't remind her. You have to leave her when she's having fun.
Yep.
And she has to go, "What?" She has to freak out, because that's the space. The space that you create after that is when she will start to idealize you and see you as a partner. Why am I still feeling this way even though I'm not with him? Well, it must be because I love him. It's just like what you were talking about earlier.
Yep.
But if you leave her on the boring note, it's like it's like we were saying just a second ago. Whatever she could, if you're a moment, or if you're an asshole in this moment, you were always an asshole. If you were boring in this moment, you were always boring. Even if you had a great date, but you leave on a boring note, in her mind, what a boring guy.
Bingo.
I'm not gonna talk. It's so crazy, but that's what it is.
That is so, and I'm glad you brought that up, because there's another example I want to throw out there, and this is part of the reason why dating is so frustrating for guys, is because there's a whole pile of stuff that is totally out of your control that is going to influence her interpretation of you. Let me give you a perfect example.
Okay.
Let's say that you, because like everyone kind of knows that like being needy is not a great thing when it comes to women. Like you don't want to be very needy, right? So let's say you're trying to arrange a date with a girl, and at the last minute something and I know women lie about this, but let's pretend that she's telling the truth for this example. Let's say you're trying to arrange a date with a girl, and then at the last minute her dog's sick and she has to take her dog to the vet. Okay, no problem. We'll reschedule for another day. And then you try on the second date, and then her car breaks down. And, oh, sorry, we have to reschedule for another day. Okay. Come to that, two things that are totally out of your control, right? Yeah. By the time you go for the third one, this is done. Like, you could be the coolest guy in the world, but because the universe has kind of conspired against you in these weird ways, her interpretation of you is now going to be, this is a needy guy that is always trying to take me out on a date, and I always reject for some reason.
Right.
Even though it's totally out of your control, and it's just total bullshit. But this is that's the reality of how her brain will interpret you, just with something that's totally out of control. And that's why dating can be real frustrating for dudes, because it's like, and that's why I tell guys, it's a numbers game, man. Like, as sad and twisted as it sounds, in today's day and age, like you said, we didn't back in caveman days, we couldn't have preferences. We couldn't have there was no such thing as abundance. Now there is, especially for women. Women have massive abundance.
Yeah,
they have, with Instagram and date, they have endless options, and it's like, all right, then if you want to find a romantic partner, you're going to have to knock on a lot of doors. Like, it's not good enough. If you really want to be a guy with abundance, if you really want to be a guy with options, and you really want to have a fun, fulfilling dating life, you are going to have to talk to and interact with a hell of a lot of women, because a lot of them are just the logistics of life are going to fucking get in your way, man.
Yeah, there's so many different branches I wanted to go off of that from. But one thing I would say is, I actually had a friend of mine years ago who, she wasn't really the most she wasn't ugly, but it was definitely wasn't somebody you'd give a second look at, just like a normal looking person, right? And she showed me her Tinder, and it was thousands of messages, thousands. It said 1,000 plus. I think it was it was definitely thousands, but I think it said 1,000 plus.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was just so, I didn't say this to her, but even in my mind there, and I'm like, somebody like you? Like what? How is that even? Even you are getting these numbers?
Yeah.
And it's crazy. But man, oh, man.
And that's an average girl. Think about like a hot girl. Like this is like I remember seeing one of my co-stars. I remember seeing one of her phone once. Like, I was like looking at the screen and looking at like the icons at the bottom with like the number, like the missed phone calls and like the missed text messages. And this wasn't even her main phone. This is her like second phone. And this was just from the people who had her fucking number. She had something like 1,000 message notifications and like 400 calls. And I'm like, what are you like? How the hell is this even manageable? And this is obviously a beautiful woman, but she's a porn star, whatever. Right. But I'm like, God, and that's just people who have your number. Like, think about the Instagram DMs, think about the Twitter DMs, like if she even bothered to have like a Tinder, like this. It's just endless piles of sausage being thrown at these women.
Yeah, it's imagine. I mean, no wonder girls are always on their phone. They got to keep up. they got a job to do. They're on the clock, man.
Well,
that's funny.
They are a clock, and they don't know. And this is one of the things that I have a real problem with, because I had this friend, right? And this is I'm talking about like women's fertility window and like their ability to have kids.
Yeah.
Because I had this friend of mine. She was 35, and she wanted to have kids, and she went in to see a fertility doctor. And the doctor told her, seriously, at 35 years old, the doctor told her, "Don't worry, you have plenty of time." I'm like, this pisses me off. This idea that they're telling women like, look, like women are, you know, you can say what you want about like women and responsibility and being accountable and stuff like that. I'm of the opinion that women are kind of retarded, and like you might be the opinion that women do know what they're doing. I'm of the opinion that women are kind of retarded and kind of stupid.
I may or may not share that opinion with you.
And I mean this in the nicest way possible, because a guy, like if I tell a 21-year-old woman, and I've actually had this conversation with a 21-year-old woman, and I say, look, you don't have the time you think you can't have it all. You can't like have a career and a family and expect like, and they'll be like, oh, but this one woman has done it. I'm like, okay, she is like the one exception to the rule, because I have, you know, I had this friend, 35-year-old woman, go to a fertility doctor. The fertility doctor tells her you have plenty of time, and I know why they told her that. So they can charge her copious amounts of money for in vitro fertilization when she's like 38 and can't get pregnant, and she's desperate to have a family. And it's like, I think that is heartbreaking. That like that our society lies to women like this, and it's they tell them a comforting lie rather than be like, this is kind of like the difference between a mother's love and a father's love. A father's love is like cruel to be kind. A father will scold you and tell you when you're acting up so that your life is set back on track. Whereas a mother will be like, oh, it's okay, baby. They don't like the nasty man was mean to you. I still love you.
This is so huge, actually. I want to bring this up before I lose it. But coming back to the trauma bonding, I think this, because even if there's no father, even if there is a father in the home, most fathers are weak. Mine was weak. And so most of the mothering is done by the woman. And because of the motherly love that you're talking about, the fatherly love has to do with reality. If you do a good thing, you get rewarded. You get praise. If you do a bad thing, the father's not going to go, don't even worry about it, sweetheart. He's going to tell you what the fuck you did wrong. But because the women have unconditional love for their children, that I think that the vast majority of men these days, now people are going to go, where's your statistics? Fuck your statistics. I don't give a shit. Even if you have statistics, it's like there's different, opinions and biases for that too. So
where's your source?
I know.
I want to hear a
Source?
source.
My head, bitch. That's the source. But I think the vast majority of men have trauma bonds with their mothers because of the unconditional love when it's good, but when it's bad, she's not able to relax because there's no masculine energy there. The reason women's unconditional love works is when it's paired with the masculinity. She can relax, but if she has to be the disciplining one, she doesn't know how to do that, and it freaks her out, especially dealing with the stress. It might even be more stressful to have a weak man because you're expecting things of him and he's just routinely failing to live up to his role, to his job. And so it might be more stressful for the woman in that situation than being a single mother altogether. But she becomes very abusive. And obviously I'm not letting them off the hook for this, but unfortunately it's almost like she doesn't really have a choice. And by she doesn't have a choice, I don't mean she's consciously choosing to be abusive, but she doesn't know. They literally don't know how to do it. They don't know how to be grounded. They don't know how to say, you fucked up, but it's okay. Here's what you do instead. The dads do that. The moms don't know how to do that.
I don't think I've ever heard those words come out of a woman's mouth. Like that, like the way a father would say it. You fucked up, kid. I don't think I've ever heard a woman use that kind of language. Now that you've said that.
Yeah, and one thing, because I had a lot of all of my friends growing up were raised by single moms. I'm really trying to think of one that had a dad, or at least a strong dad, that made an impression on me, but I can't really think of any right now. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure there was one, but there's very often, and I would get to see these interactions play out as well, because I would go with vacations with a lot of them, and they're not able to hold back their volatility. The moms are not able to hold back their volatility, and so a little bit of that abusiveness would get shown whenever I would hang out with them for long periods of time. Yeah. And they would also tell me what their moms are doing. And it's these, first of all, they do physically abuse them. So let's get that out there right now. Abusive moms are also physical as well as mental. Okay. A lot of people are like, oh, but at least moms aren't physical. They definitely are physical.
They're definitely physical.
Yeah. One of the big mental plays that they do is they are literally children. They are the ones telling their children, I don't feel like I receive enough gratitude. You know what? I'm not treated properly, regardless of how old they are. If they're children young enough to be living with you, even if they're teenagers, they're kids. They don't know. They don't know that they're supposed to. They don't know, the gratitude doesn't come until, the gratitude for your parents doesn't really come until later. Especially if you're living with them. It's like, you also just don't know, especially if you didn't teach them that to act in a conscious, grounded, distant way where you can appreciate things. If you've been raised by a single mom without any masculine energy, with a dad to show you how to be distant and aloof in that grounded way, not in a silly way, but in a grounded way, then you're essentially being raised by another child, because she expects the same things out of you that you do out of her emotionally.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any of that. And that's something you see, talking about like the whole single mother thing. I think that's a reason why you see like the vast majority of violent offenders, the vast majority of people that end up in the prison system, the overwhelming majority come from, I believe I'm correct with this, single mother households, right? And think about it, like it's you're taught from a young age that violence is the solution to an emotional problem. Like that emotion comes in, violence goes out. That's like the world you grow up in when you have like a single mother being like physically hitting kids. And so like what does a young man in that context, what does he seek out? Well, he tries to seek out masculinity. And in a lot of situations, let's say like urban situations, like in like, urban, like Chicago neighborhoods or wherever you might fall, South Central LA, what are they going to find? They're going to find a gang which has the only semblance of masculine role models in their environment. Because everyone else is a woman or a giant pussy. So it's like, okay, well, these guys have some balls. I'm going to go hang out with these guys.
Right.
And then voila, they've got this like lack of like emotional control reinforced by their mother, right? Because the father wasn't there to set boundaries and like, no, you don't do this. Like, stop acting like a little bitch. Like, just deal with it and move on, right? Instead, they've been taught react emotionally. So you couple that with like gang violence, and you get people who go to jail for killing people. Like it's not that complicated to understand why that happens.
Yeah. I also even what was I going to say? Oh, as far as this is kind of off topic from what you're talking about, but I wanted to ask you. I want to bring this up as well. In one of your videos, you talk about, or probably in a lot of them, but in one of them that I'm thinking of, you talked about performance anxiety. And I think performance anxiety is actually a universal phenomenon for guys in their general life. Guys are always experiencing performance anxiety. It's just that it might turn into something you can label in a bedroom setting, because sex with a woman is kind of it's sort of like the culmination of all your achievements in one event. This is your life event. If you fuck this up, you're not a man. That's why it's so heartbreaking for guys when they get cheated on, because like girls getting cheated on, if it's I don't want to digress into that, but it's different than what a guy feels when he gets cheated on, because a guy is essentially a weak man. You're essentially a failure as a man and as a person if you fail to please the woman, because it is subconsciously implied by how women feel about you that you are either successful or not successful as a man, if you can please them or not.
It's there's two things there. So one, like when a guy gets cheated on, it's like like the girl he was with is going and fucking another dude. It's basically saying your genes are not worth replicating. Like,
right.
You should be. It's basically saying you should be deleted. She's saying you should be deleted from the gene pool. That's really what she's saying, which is fucked up. So that's
I
why
wouldn't be
it's so
surprised to hear that, actually.
That's so emotionally like impactful, right? And that's not the case when a guy cheats on a woman, because a guy can impregnate a whole ton of women, and they're passing their genes on. You know what I mean? That's why. That's why I personally believe cheating is very, very different for men and women. We can digress to that after this next point. Yeah. But performance anxiety, you're right. It's the culmination of all your efforts as a man is to inseminate. It all leads to inseminating that woman.
Right.
And if you can't do that, well, poof, there goes your genetic lineage. Done.
Right.
It's ended with you and your limp dick. It's all these generations, and you fucked it up. Like, that's really
you and your fucking limp dick. God damn it,
you screwed it up. But you're absolutely right in that, like, life as a man is in a large part this kind of battle with performance anxiety. And a good like practical example I can think of is like shooting free throws at the line in a basketball game, or taking the game-winning shot in a game in basketball, like, or penalty shootout in a soccer match or whatever it is, like that anxiety. But the thing is, like, it's the exact same feeling that a dude would get if he was having performance anxiety in the bedroom. The only difference is your dick doesn't work when you get it. So you can still kick a football and you can still shoot a basketball if you have that anxiety, because the rest of your body is like, it's a fight or flight response mechanism. So like your body is designed to move, like every other part of your body is designed to move and work except for your dick, because that's the least important if you're being chased down by a tiger. So that's why it fucks with you. It's like, it's literally the fight or flight mechanism kicking in and being like, all right, pump all the blood away from unnecessary parts of the body and pump it to the legs, and so we can get the fuck out of here. That's what it is doing.
And the hormones, so the brain doesn't want you being attracted to other things while you're in danger. So it's like, it doesn't matter if you're trying to have sex. It's like, no, we're having sex. Everything's cool. We're having sex right now. And your brain thinks that you need to get the fuck out of there. So it's like, no. Don't be turned on. Don't get a boner. We're not doing that right now. You need to run.
Yeah, exactly. Get the hell out of here.
The performance anxiety as well, just in general, is because men are taught to do things to succeed, while women are taught to do things to have fun. Women are taught that if he's not treating you right, you come right back home. Just things like that. And if men, what men are told is, if you're failing, if something's not going right in your life, if things are going wrong, then you better figure it out. You better figure out how to make it succeed, because it's your fucking fault. And if you can't, nobody's gonna like you. Yep. Not only that, but you're not even deserving. It's not like nobody's even going to feel bad for you, because you're the one who's fucking it up. Women's failures are blamed on the society. Men's failures are blamed individually. Yeah,
it's a failure of the system. If a woman are sort of failing in any way, shape, or form. I want to touch on one last thing. We've been going for a while. We could probably keep talking all night, but we will have to wrap it up at some point. Sure. The last thing I want to touch on is cheating, and cheating. The difference between cheating for men and cheating for women. So I'll give you what I believe would classify the difference between the two, and I think for women, like, this idea of cheating comes down to like the idea of loyalty, right? And it comes down to, is she not just like having sex? Obviously, like when a chick has sex with another dude, that is cheating. But I would classify female cheating as I'd go even further than that, and I'd say if she is actively looking at other options, that's cheating. And what I mean by that, okay, does she have a dating app still on her phone? Does she have a goddamn Instagram account? And is she still talking? Is she still responding to DMs on Instagram? Is she still posting shit like flirtatious, provocative photos on Instagram that are designed to grab male attention? That's the key thing there. Is she still like trying to get the attention of other men? If the answer is a yes, then you have a woman who's not loyal to you. So you don't have a relationship,
right?
Really, that's my definition of if a woman is doing that, then I can't take her seriously. Basically, that's kind of like how I would look at and define: am I in a relation? Is a girl in a relationship with me or not? Well, is she doing this kind of shit? Well, then I cannot take her seriously. Right. Now, with dudes, I would say that cheating. I honestly think that maybe this is where we might disagree. I'm not probably not as traditional as you might be, but I would say that that dudes can actually have sex with other women, and it's not cheating, because it's only cheating if he's giving his resources to another woman. I'd say it comes down to resources. Like, is he providing for there were examples of this, like in the pre-internet age, of like you'd hear about the traveling salesman who had like families in different like states. You know, he'd have a wife and kids over here in Nebraska, and he's got another wife and kids over here somewhere in Florida or something. Like that, I would classify. Okay, yeah, cool. You could call that guy a cheater because he's providing for another woman. Because that's that's kind of like the battle in terms of right of the opposite sexes, is like men want to like put their that men want assurance that the kids they're providing for are their kids. That is the biggest concern for men in regards to sex, is like, are those kids actually mine? That's what it all comes down to. That's what all fidelity comes down to. That's what all loyalty comes down to. It's the assurance that those are my kids, which is why virgins were valued. That's the reason why virgins are valued. With women, it comes down to, am I going to be safe? Like, and am I and my kids going to be provided for, or are we going to be destitute and out on the street and vulnerable in the world? So I think no, that's for me at least. That's the two definitions. That's how you can distinguish between men cheating and women cheating. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. Well, that's actually super interesting. I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, if that's what classifies women's cheating, what exactly would it be that classifies men's cheating? Because I've heard that if a guy sleeps around, it's not really the same thing as a woman sleeping around. And personally, I agree with that. I'm on the same page with you there, but personally, I wouldn't, if I had a family. I think people underestimate how much energy and time goes into creating, having a successful and healthy and exciting relationship with somebody that you're committed to. So I think that if more men were actually in relationships where they were trying to make that happen with a decent woman, actually, obviously, then they wouldn't be so eager about pushing this idea that I should still be able to sleep around. I think guys who push that actually don't have as many options as they pretend to. Not that I'm saying about you, but personally, I wouldn't do that because I'm thinking of the child. If I have a child, part of me wants to be this pimp and say, "Fuck women, I should, just go around and have kids. I'm a man, I get to do that." And it would imply I'm that much higher status of a man if I did that. But really, I'm thinking of the kid. I don't want to produce more fatherless children. If I produce more children, I would want to be responsible for making sure that they turn into conscious, grounded, productive, fully fledged human beings. And so it just doesn't seem, even though I agree with you as far as definitions go, personally, I don't agree that should be encouraged with guys. And I personally wouldn't do that. I think you should have your pick. You should attract lots of women to the best of your ability to pick the best one. And but at the end of the day, you should pick one to commit to, because you're creating another society in your house. Society is made up of households. So if your household sucks, or if you're actively going around sleeping with women and fucking them off, and you're essentially creating more fatherless households that is going to produce weaker children, angrier children who are not a benefit to society, who are going to vote for socialism, which is essentially government control, and turn us all into slaves. So you're essentially worsening society if you're creating a bunch of fatherless children. So even though I agree with definitions, personally, I don't think that it's a productive way to encourage men to go
in practicality.
Right.
Yeah. Well, look, I think that's a really good spot for us to end it on. Fine, like maybe we didn't necessarily disagree, but at least we had two different sort of ways of coming at the same idea. Where is the best place now for everyone to find you?
At the moment, I'm on YouTube, Nuance Now. I've got a shitload of projects coming out. The thing is, this type of content, it's more. Anyways, you can find me on YouTube at Nuance Now. I'm also on Patreon at Nuance Now as well. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, and you do have a second. You have Nuance Now too on TikTok, but that one is also.
I do, but I'm not gonna be posting on TikTok anymore. I'm just,
okay.
Or at least not in the near future. I'm gonna be only on YouTube.
Right, fair enough. All right, cool. And then if anyone who wants to find my stuff, sterlingcooper.com. Right, where's my hand? There we go. That's the easiest place to find all my stuff, and I'm on YouTube, which is the easiest place. And we'll make sure we drop a link to your channel in the description down below on my channel. I want everyone.
I'll drop one of yours as well.
I want all my guys to come and support your stuff, because I think you put out some fantastic content. And I think you've got some really, really nuanced, oddly enough, views on a lot of stuff. And you're a 21-year-old guy. I'm a 34-year-old dude. It took me 34 years to figure out some of the shit you figured out already. So that says quite a lot. So I'm looking forward to seeing, more and more from you in the coming years, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm really glad we did this. This is I learned a lot of things I didn't expect to learn here.
Good. That's what this is for. Simple. Look, it's called dialogue, people. Good Lord. This is what it's for. This is why you don't go canceling people on TikTok.
Right. Yeah.
Jesus Christ. All right. Well, with that note, I'm going to hit this end button.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more of Sterling Cooper's content, his channel will be linked down in the description. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments section below. Make sure to smash that like button if you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe and click the bell so that you never miss a new upload. If you would like to talk to me personally, the link for one-on-ones as well as all the rest of my links will be down in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I will see y'all in the next video. Take care.